Oi, oi, it's your boy, the David Hay of
This sounds very gay.
Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following a quiet night at the UFC Apex. If an event goes down at the UFC Apex and no one is around, does it still make a sound? Well, I watched it, and I'll tell you about it. And if you didn't watch it, there were a couple of good things on this one, I thought. Main event was Tatsuro Taira versus Hyun-Sung Park. Park coming in at last minute to replace Amir Albazi, who managed to drop out like earlier this week. So they just dropped the Park portrait in on top of the poster, and it all went fine. No one noticed or cared because already this fight was only appealing to the hardcores. But I'll be honest, I was watching Park's fights this week, and I was like, he seems decent. Good hitter at flyweight, seems decently rounded, undefeated prospect. These are the ones that surprise people, and I brought out my usual story about Alexander Hernandez, mid-ass fighter, came into the UFC at short notice against Beneil Dariush, who clearly had no idea about anything to do with Hernandez, and Dariush was on the way to a title shot at the time. This is the first time before he had grey hair, and Hernandez just surprised him and smoked him out of nowhere. Hernandez's career went nowhere. Well, he's been in the UFC forever, but he wins, loses alternately and barely ever has an entertaining fight. Certainly never looked like that guy again. So there is always that danger when you take a last-minute change of opponents, and it's almost a lose-lose because if you beat that person, it's going to be like, cool, you beat unnamed guy. But there's still a bit of a mystery to you. But Tatsuro Taira came out and put on a real there are levels to this performance. I thought he looked fantastic. Came out early, didn't dive after the legs because that's what Park would be expecting. But Park was sort of timid to start the round. So Taira popped him with a jab. And when Park jabbed back, Taira pulled in through the right hand across the top. Lovely straight right hand, right above the eye. And Park, you saw him touch his own face to check it wasn't broken. And then he followed up with a good right hand to knock Park down. Ended up using a beautiful smash pass. I mean, the great thing about Taira is that he brings all kinds of cool techniques. It wasn't that long ago that he snapped poor old Alex Perez's ACL by doing all that hanging on the back stuff with the inside body triangle. Something I did a film room on, you can check on the YouTube channel, but very popular in the Japanese MMA scene. But here Taira used a beautiful smash pass. The smash pass is sometimes called a weave pass, but it's where you basically, when you're in the opponent's guard, you want to put their knees together and down to one side of you. And then you put your hip on top of it. You sprawl on top of it. So they're in a ladylike side saddle sit sort of position. You saw it all through that first round, that whole time that Park's knees were crushed together, both pointing off to his side. Basically got nothing to attack Taira with. And then it's a case of trying to run around to the back or move straight through to mount. And any position like that where you have both the opponent's knees pointing in one direction and you're passing their guard, you sort of encourage them to turn. And when they turn, you get the chance to take their back, which Taira did. Good amount of fighting with him on Park's back. Park makes it to the second round. Came out. I thought he was going to come out like Darren Till against Tyron Woodley in that second round. Darren Till against Tyron Woodley. The first round he spends it going, but if I do something, he might do something back. And then he has such a bad first round that he comes out for the second round and immediately commits to punching and gets counted, falls for it hook, line, and sinker. First round was only feints. Second round was I'm coming out of the gate to throw one long left straight. But Parker, he sat back a bit and then he tried to strike, and Taira timed a beautiful double leg, got his hands locked along the cage, pulled his legs out. Got on the back again, body triangle. This time he got goes down as a face crank. I want to point out that there's a difference between there's face cranks and there's face cranks. It's very funny that the two greatest women's MMA fighters of all time have both submitted to face crank, and it's just been rear naked choke across the teeth, which is if your jaw doesn't explode, probably shouldn't tap to that. But then there's the kind which is actually more of a neck crank when you get the guy's jaw in your rear naked choke and you point his head to the side, and then you start trying to crunch him forward so that his head goes side, so his head turns sideways and then you flex it forwards towards his chest, and that's a neck crank, and they're horrible. And the great thing about the neck crank like that is that it punishes people who are just tucking their chin, because that's not a legit defense, or it isn't a legit defense if the guy knows how to neck crank and neck crank's illegal. And a lot of guys, when they get savage to that, or they just don't enjoy being neck cranked, they pop their own chin out and give you the choke. That happened to Damien Meyer all the time. Damien Meyer would turn the guy's head, deliberately miss the rear naked choke, start putting some pressure on, and the guy would pop his chin up and put the choke under his own jaw. So a very cool showing by Taira. Sad for Hyun Sung Park because he got a chance to come in and upset the order of things, and he really just got styled on. He didn't have a single moment in this fight. But great for Taira because obviously he's coming off the loss to Brandon Royval, where it was a bit of a surprise, really, how much he struggled in that one, because he was like Japan's big hope for a UFC belt. You know, Kyoji Horiguchi is probably the best Japanese fighter so far, but Taira was the big hope for a UFC belt, and he just had a lot of trouble with Brandon Royval, which people didn't expect because Brandon Royval's trouble has been with the wrestling. He gives up his back a lot. It seemed like that should be Taira's easy work, but you never know. People surprise you. Co-main event was Chris Duncan versus Mateusz Rebecki. If you haven't watched any of these fights, I'm highly recommending this one. People loved the one just before this, Esteban Ribovic versus Elvis Brener. I'm going to say that one sort of hit its stride and then got a bit samey. This one was terrific, I thought. Chris Duncan, orthodox, Rebecki southpaw. Rebecki is a fantasy-style dwarf, just thicker than he is tall, and he just walks people down and throws overhand lefts and tries to wrestle. And what I liked about this one was you saw very early on Duncan was going to try and defuse him by circling not into the left hand, but to the left side of Rebecki's body. So when you're orthodox versus a southpaw, a wonderful thing happens stance-wise when you're in that open stance situation, where if you try, say you're orthodox left foot forwards, try retreating back to your left diagonally. Really unnatural. Because your right foot's behind you, your left foot's in front of you. They're probably about hip width apart, maybe a little bit less. But the hole in your balance is where you're trying to step to. Obviously, you can do it by changing stances, but stepping back on a diagonal like that is very tricky in that direction. Whereas if you step back on a diagonal to your right, where your right foot is, you just step onto that foot. You can then continue that way. You can slide around the opponent. It's a really nice method of circling that doesn't... It works really well in an open stance matchup. You don't see it that much in closed stance matchups, but you can move very naturally in that direction. So if you're facing a southpaw and you start circling backwards to your right, circling outwards, spiraling out, I often call it, you're going across their center line. You're going towards that left hand in terms of side to side. But you are lengthening it. You're trying to encourage them to throw long left hands that are much easier to pick off, duck under, shoot inside. And if they keep trying to correct the distance before they throw, they're going to end up, you can just walk them forwards and then stop and drop the right hand in their grill. So you saw Duncan in the very first moment of this fight. Circle, 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 right straight, duck under the left hand. And he did that a few times in this fight. He got himself into trouble almost immediately, though, because he then lunged forward with the right elbow, up elbow, which split open a huge gash on Rebecki's brow, but Rebecki hit him with a counter right hook at the same time. And that's the sort of trade-off. If you're throwing big right hands at the southpaw and you're trying to draw out their left hand, if they just slap you with the counter right hand, the short right hook as you're coming in, they can often get you because you're going to be pulling your left hand back. So that was the trade-off the whole fight. Duncan was trying to land right straights and right elbows, and Rebecki basically, he was throwing his left hand, but he sort of eschewed it to try and land these counter right hooks. And sometimes Duncan would fake and he'd throw the right hook and spin himself around in his stance. He'd turn his back because he was throwing this counter right hook so hard. But I thought Duncan, who is known as a grappler, and Rebecki's known as a good top player, but also big hitter. And Duncan really took his best weapons away from him and still outstruck him or outlanded him. Afterwards, he did say, he looked in the camera and he went, "Ugh, look at me fucking face." Because he was generically from Scotland. Also threw some lovely body kicks. If your opponent, and Mateusz Rebecki did this, if your opponent takes a front kick to the body and then fights the next half minute of the fight with their right hand on their belly button, you probably hurt them. So I was pleased to see Duncan stuck with the body kicks. He didn't just ignore it after then. So Duncan got the win, and I think probably well deserved, even though it was a great back and forth scrap. People talking about it being fight of the year. There were 2 fight of the nights on this card. They gave out 2 fight of the night bonuses rather than performance bonuses. Esteban Ribovic versus Elvis Brener was good fun. This was sort of like a less technical sort of slog. But still two guys banging. It just got a bit samey for me by round 3 because they were both knackered. Ribovich, what I really love about him, he's like the great 1950s boxing journeyman, the guy who has a really good left hook, which is mechanically quite difficult to have a good left hook, and uses it loads, but is just sort of like hard-nosed, get in your face sort of guy. But he was landing these counter left hooks beautifully. Sometimes he'd just throw the left hook and slip his head to the right. Sometimes he'd throw the left hook and step his left foot back behind him, which is a lovely little counter. Sometimes he'd parry and come back with the left hook. But that left hook was giving Brener hell. And then in the second round, Brener worked out, I should just throw loads of jabs. And that worked really well for him. He just kept Esteban Ribovich on the end of his jab. Ribovich pulled himself back into it. Third round, Ribovich went southpaw for a lot of the round, and he looked really good. It was just a really fun fight. I saw someone say on Reddit that Esteban Ribovich is going to have the fight of the night, and he just dragged Elvis Brener along with him. That's because I think this is his third fight of the night bonus on the trot. It was Hack Paras last time, and who was it before that? I want to say Zellhuber. Yeah, Zellhuber. Anything else on this card? Neil Magny stopped Zaleski. That was a surprise because I thought Magny was way more washed than Zaleski. And I always joke about Magny. I go, he comes in against his opponents, and if they kick his leg, he goes, they've watched the tape, and then he loses. He goes, we'll try again next time. Because it's been a problem in his game forever. He just can't check a goddamn low kick. And Zaleski, I'm going, you need to throw more low kicks, Zaleski. And afterwards, I look at it, he landed 11 out of 13. He didn't throw any low kicks, and he still landed almost 80% of them or whatever. But Zaleski was choosing to wrestle at multiple points in this fight, which was bizarre, against Neil Magny, whose whole thing is like, please engage me in the wrestling and I'll tire you out. I'll tell you what I did like, though. Firstly, Magny, when his back was to the fence in round 1, he hit a little trip off the fence, which is like Pantoja did to Kai Asakura. Just a little trip, and then he smashed Zaleski with a left hook on the jaw as he was off balance. And Magny's not a big hitter, but you saw it. It ruffled Zaleski's feathers because he was like head in the chest from that point on. Round 2, Zaleski comes out, takes him down. Neil Magny's bottom game, really cool in this one, I thought. He was in half guard. He did a beautiful knee lever to off balance Zaleski. Didn't get the sweep. He's not Mansour Barnoui. But he hit the off balance and he used it to sit up on the octopus guard and start working that. Then he didn't like that, so he abandoned the octopus guard and ended up coming into what they sometimes call a lower leg shift or the Lucas Leitch position, and ended up wrestling up on a single. And then he got Zaleski to the fence, beat him up a bit, took him down. And I think did he flatten him out from the back and then TKO him? I can't remember the end, but it was basically just I want to say overwhelmed, but he just whelmed Zaleski. He just did his usual thing. And Zaleski gassed the hell out, which is crazy. I mean, he is like 40 years old, but why did you gas yourself out wrestling? Why not just run and kick? As that has been your game before. I mean, he did it against Renat Fakhrenidov. He just ran, tried to counter the takedowns, and threw body kicks. And granted, on Fakhrenidov's record, that went down as a draw or a win for Fakhrenidov, but it very much was Zaleski's fight. Kevin Valigos versus Danny Silva. I was actually impressed by Danny Silva here. A lot of people I saw were not hot on him. They didn't like that. He has a really annoying thing that you seldom see it because it requires great skill, but also almost no self-awareness. Bobby Green used to do it. Being capable of slipping and rolling with punches or taking them on your elbows and shoulders in a slick way, but then not using that to your advantage in any way. If you can shoulder roll punches and stuff, stay in the pocket and then counter, because you've got a great chance of getting the guy off balance and out of position. If you do it and then you go, and you make kissy faces and you wink and you give him a side eye, you brush your shoulders off and stuff, and you don't do anything afterwards, people go, what a dickhead, I hope he loses. And judges do that too. Because Silva didn't get hit that bad. Like if you watch Valigos' fights, he hits people clean with counters. He lands the right hand across the top of the jab all the time. He slips inside, comes up with a left hook. He's really affecting people with these blows. And in this fight, like I'm watching him hit Danny Silva, but a lot of them don't have anything on them. A lot of them are hitting his elbows and shoulders. Danny Silva looked defensively very good against a guy who's pretty tricky. But it was only in the last round that Danny Silva actually got to work trying to put more than one thing on him. He kept throwing this. He'd go southpaw and he'd throw this left straight, and then he'd duck, like the jab and dip, but from southpaw. And that worked fantastically in scoring a single point and then Kevin Valigos missing. But he never followed up on it until round 3 when he was actually finally going, Left straight duck, grab the head, knee. And I was like, that's gorgeous. Do more of that. But it was too little too late. But he's definitely going on the list of like, oh, hope he works it out. You know, I hope his coaches have a good shout at him because he's got talent. It's not a lack of ability that's going to hold him back. It's not doing enough. Whereas Valigos was great fun. You know, I liked that he redoubled his commitment to the body because he was struggling to land on Danny Silva's head. So he uses the right straight to the body to close in a lot and then throw left hook, right overhand upstairs. But in this fight, he was going like right straight to the body, left hook to the body. You know, throwing multiple punches to the body in sequence, throwing front kicks to the body, even though he's the shorter man. There was a lot of cool stuff in there by Valigos. Rinya Nakamura won his fight by body kick against some lad I'm not familiar with, and probably won't have to be because he very quickly got body kicked. And there was another one on this one, like Austin Bashi versus John Yanis, super hot up-and-coming prospect against guy who just turned up. But Andrei Puliev, he fought Nick Klein, and Nick Klein had another, like this was another body kick TKO, but Nick Klein came out like a house on fire, and he smashed straight into Puliev, underhook pin along the fence with his left underhook, starts unloading right hands on the guy. And this is the one, like, if you see someone doing that, they're either going to smash the guy in the first round or they're going to use a ton of energy doing it. To throw hard punches from that head pin position is pretty tiring. That's why you see guys lean, pop out for an elbow, lean, dig a knee. It's very rarely that, like, pull back and start throwing multiple uppercuts and trying to stop them, unless they've really obviously hurt them already. And to be fair to Nick Klein, through this first round, he was on him like white on rice. But then the moment that Puliev got up in the second round, he just went. He went southpaw. He put his lead hand on Nick Klein's lead hand, and then he punched him in the face with the other one, both hands out at the same time. Which is like, that's not good boxing, but he was able to do it here. And then he threw a body kick. Klein ate the body kick and fell down. Because if you're already tired in round two, at the start of round two, and you eat a body kick, yeah, life's not going well. Anything else? 2 weight misses on this one. Trejon Gore, who is like 5-4 now in his career, and I think all the 4 are in the UFC, so he's long gone. And Rafael Estevam missed flyweight by 5 pounds, maybe 4 pounds. I think it's 126, isn't it? The non-title weight. But this dude's nickname should just be Big Dinners. Rafael Big Dinners Estevam, because he missed his weight 2 fights ago as well. He's only had 3 fights in the UFC, missed weight in 2 of them. And honestly, flyweights, you're normally pretty sure I'm going to get some fast, technical MMA action. But these two looked like they were moving in syrup. And it was basically Estevam just sort of like getting top position and holding it, grinding his head down, landing the odd elbow, but a lot of just sort of grindy stuff, which is the stuff that actually really does help being massively overweight for. You know, if he came out and boxed this guy up, I'd be like, yeah, well, doesn't help you being a lot heavier, doesn't help you being 5 pounds overweight that, you know. But this was very clearly like he's just leaning on the guy from closed guard. Or Bunez would even get his knees in front and he'd be leaning on him there. There was a buggy choke attempt. It didn't look close, and it didn't do the goal of a good buggy attempt, which is to get the guy to do something. So that, you know, get the guy to lift himself up so that you can drop off him and create some space and get back to either regard or get up. And then I think it was the second round, he tried an outside buggy, which is something I found more success with than the buggy. I'm not good at buggies at all, but the outside buggy is on the opposite side. And if you fail on it, you can sort of roll through on a headlock or up to your knees. It links well with something that there's a guy called Shane Curtis, great Instagram, in the UK, who's basically his move is turning away, getting the headlock and the arm and rolling into a scarf hold. And Oliveira did that to Kevin Lee as well. But all of that can come off an outside buggy. It leads you into rolling away from the opponent. But yeah, not a bad night of fights. Not an amazing night of fights. A couple of good fights on there. And we had a one event at the weekend, but I'll talk about that on the Boycast. If you want to get in on that, join the Patreon. I'm going to be writing something big about Khamzat Chimaev in the next week or two, which is going to be Patreon exclusive. So get over there onto that. I'm your boy Jack Slack, and I'll catch you later in the week. There's still a girl called Nora Cornhole on the roster. Bless.